Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host Tony Clement here with Aaron Shull. He is a managing director and general counsel to the Center for International Governance Innovation. We also have Dr. Laura DeNardis. She is a professor at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Laura, when the West sort of switched off these internet connections, I'm maybe asking a political science question, and I'll ask both of you the same question, but when the West switched off these internal internet connections, did that actually help Vladimir Putin keep more control over the population? Is that one of the concerns?
The same exact technologies that can enable the free flow of information can repress it. And every instance of cutting off, one side of censorship is also control. It's also freedom. Values are always in tension. I think that some of it actually did help Putin. If you think that a site of resistance is actually the people in Russia and the ability of them to communicate maybe with family members in Ukraine and to get information from outside sources, then if you think about that as a point of resistance, then it doesn't make sense to cut off Russia. If you think about it from the standpoint of wanting to prevent the Russian government from promulgating propaganda outside of the borders, then it does make sense. So I think in some ways it did help Putin. In other ways, it helped the cause of freedom.
Aaron, what's your point of view on this?
Yeah, no, I think rather than kind of repeating Laura, I'll just riff off what she said. So there's the technical architecture that we've been discussing, but you had raised it in the context of politics. And there's law in Russia that goes at the heart of this, right? So they passed a fake news law that prohibits anyone talking about the Russian army. And so you've got the technical aspects where certain Western companies are pulling out. There's less platforms. There's also centralization of control in Russia of the platforms. So now they're watching everything that's going on in these platforms, and they're passing laws to limit speech with real teeth. Yeah, like jail time. Think jail time for coming up with a message that's contrary to what's coming out of the Kremlin right now. So certainly there's the technical architecture, there's the legal architecture, and then there's just a straight chilling effect that comes into play.
Yeah, there's you got to be pretty brave in Russia to stand up against that. I saw some video of a fellow who in some public square just recently knocked over a loudspeaker that was playing the Russian national anthem, and immediately was escorted out of sight by the police. So there are some brave souls in Russia, but it's just tough to do anything, given the current circumstances. I guess the broader question, Aaron, to you, that Laura also raised was just how susceptible the internet is to government shutdowns. This seems to be a new area, and Laura mentioned that Ukraine Ukraine asked for a complete shutdown for Russia. ICANN said no, but this seems to be more and more a battlefield. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. And there's a few things that are happening here. So Russia passed something called the Sovereign Internet Law, and this did a few things. But part of it was basically state control over these services, where they're bringing everything together, centralizing control with a view to monitoring what's going on and controlling that free speech that we talked about. They're also using it as a tool to throttle companies that are doing things that they don't like. So at the technical layer, this is all playing out. But this all is about routing internet traffic. And what Russia ultimately is probably going to try and do is create their own domain name system or their own Russian internet. We're looking at is what they call a splinternet. The internet was created to be interoperable, to have one worldwide web. And we are very, very quickly moving away from that model.
Laura, is this inevitable at this point?
It actually has a long history. It's been happening for a long time. I think the Egyptian internet outage is the best example of that. And that was quite a while ago. But just on a daily basis, there are many shutdowns of the internet. It's not always the free flow of information. And some of it is for law enforcement reasons. Some of it is for things like using the domain name system for intellectual property rights enforcement. It's not always just a geopolitical issue. But the big takeaway there is that even though the internet is decentralized, there are actually many different choke points where you can block information and take people down and take information down. And the mechanisms that you see around Russia and the digital sanctions is certainly a prime example of that.
We're going to continue our discussion with our two guests, talking about this new digital Iron Curtain.